Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, Getting Ready for Tax Time. I can't think of a more exciting thing for us to be talking about. Sorry, we have gremlins here in the office. So my name's Monica. Welcome to everybody. And I also just want to flag with you that we're using Crowdcast for the first time. So regular visitors to our webinar will know that I'm a little bit crap at the technology involved in these webinars. I only just got good at the last platform we were using, and now I've just decided to use another one. So hello to Crowdcast watchers, hello to Facebook Live, hello to YouTube. I'm going to try not to think about all the technological aspects of what we're doing here, but I am happy to report that we have the trusty Lily, who's right there, and we also have the trusty Irene, who made all that noise a minute ago. So hopefully we'll be able to figure it out. I hope you can all hear me. If you can't hear me, please do let me know in the chat because I'm assuming that everything's working. Before we go any further, I would like to just point out that we are making this webinar on Gadigal land, and we are, hang on, I don't know what I'm doing. Here we go. We are making this webinar on Gadigal land, which is part of the Eora Nation, and we also want to pay our respects to any Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander people who are attending this webinar. Thank you so much for coming. I also just want to give you a quick overview of who we are, because some of you may not know us. So I am the director and doyen of a social enterprise called Creative Plus Business, and we spend as much time as humanly possible helping creative people to develop their business skills. That means everything from running workshops and hosting events to webinars and making content and basically everything that we can think of. And I'll give you a little bit of insight in a minute to some of the things that are coming up. We're a social enterprise, which means that a lot of our stuff is free or subsidised, including this webinar. If you haven't been to our website, then please do go and visit creativeplusbusiness.com, and you can find a whole lot more stuff there, and I'll be referring to some of those links in a minute. Now, remember that there are two ways that you can interact with this webinar. You can say hello and have a chat on the right-hand side of your screen. Lily is monitoring that chat right now. Remember to be kind. I know we're talking about tax, but there's no reason to, get all grumpy about that. If you want to ask a question, there's a section down the bottom which is helpfully called Ask a Question, and I will do my best to answer it live. I'm not necessarily going to be able to answer everything, but your questions will help to give us some guidance about the follow-up that we might need to do with you or extra resources that we can create for you. Before we get into the webinar, I just want to tell you a little bit about what's coming soon. We've got 2 events that are occurring in the next couple of weeks and months that you might be interested in. The first one is a new program that we're running called Artcelerate. It's a daggy name. I came up with it. I'm really proud of it. Shush. Artcelerate is an 8-week program to help you write and finish that business or strategic plan that's been hovering around for all that time. For those of you who know that you need a business plan or a strategic plan, maybe you're applying for something, or you need to get a loan, or you just want to get yourself organized, then Artcelerate is probably the answer for you. It runs for 8 Wednesday nights starting on the 31st of July, and you can either attend in person if you're in Sydney, or you can Zoom in. We can provide an online facility for you so that you can actually attend without being here in person. 2 other things that I should mention about that. We have an early bird on at the moment. So that 8-week program is only $540, which is a little bit of a bargain. Plus, we have a payment system. So if that big lot of money is a lot for you, but you can break it down into 4 sections, you can elect to pay with the payment plan. So there's a couple of options there for you. It starts on the 31st of July, and you can follow this link to go and check it out. The next thing I wanted to point out is for those of you who are in Australia, and particularly in New South Wales, we have a whole run of workshops coming up. Now, none of them have really been made live yet. We're doing that on the 1st of July to coincide with the new financial year. I'm sorry, I'm trying to make this as fun as possible. Really, it's not working. But please do go and check that out from the 1st of July. You'll be able to book into a whole lot of fantastic workshops about a range of different things, and our next webinar, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So let's get into it. First thing I want to mention is a word of caution. Now, we are not accountants. Don't freak out. Don't leave. It's fine. What I'm going to be doing is essentially resource sharing. All of the information that I'm going to give to you comes directly from the Australian Taxation Office. So I'm not putting any spin on it. I'm not applying anything to it. It's just information that I've found for you from them that I think will be useful for you, and a few other resources as well. Please don't consider anything that we're sharing tonight to be financial advice or accountancy advice. We're not accountants or financial advisors, and we're not allowed to give you that advice. But we are allowed to teach you about how to do it yourself and where some of those resources are. It's really important, particularly in the creative industries, that when you are trying to make this all work for yourself, that you find an accountant who specializes in creative industries. There aren't many of them, and they are more expensive than a normal accountant, but there's a really good reason for that. If you're a creative professional, then you basically straddle 3 different groups of taxpayers, okay? First of all, you are what's called an individual for tax purposes. That means you've got a tax file number and you're participating in the tax system just like anybody else. You're going to have income coming in from multiple different sources. So you need someone who understands that, which is pretty basic. You're also, some of you, those of you with an ABN, could be classified as a small business. That means you need an accountant who understands all the special deductions and concessions and considerations that are around for small businesses. And thirdly, you're creative practitioners. There are 3 separate tax rulings specifically for you, and I'm going to share them with you tonight so you can find them and go and have a look at them. If your accountant doesn't know about all 3 of those aspects of accountancy, then you are dealing with the wrong accountant. You need to find someone who can understand those 3 things. Now, a lot of the time, people want to find an accountant that is close to them geographically. That's great. It's nice to have an accountant in the same town as you, but you don't need to have an accountant in the same town as you because of modern technology. Here we all are having a chat with each other, and some of you are like halfway around the world. Plus, also, let's be real. Do you want to go out for a beer with your accountant? Is it important for you to like chum up? Lily's shaking her head. She says no. Find an accountant who is located within your professional area, not located within your geographical area. My accountant is 1,000 miles away from where I live now. She's right in my neighbourhood. That's what you need to be looking for. I can hear you all going, but wait, Monica, well, we find such magical creatures. I'll tell you, the groovy accountants, we've already found them for you. If you go onto the resources page of our website, which is just up the top there, you will find the Groovy Accountants. They're the first resource, and it's one of our most popular pages because we do all the fun things around here. There's a whole bunch of them. All of their different specialty areas are listed. All of their websites are listed. You can contact them all and ask them for a quote or to, you know, just see what their costs are going to be. And you'll find them. And yes, Lily's also pointed out that there's a direct link there to the Groovy Accountant. So thank you very much, Laura, for doing that. If you have an accountant that you consider to be especially groovy and they're not listed here, then please get in touch with us. That's hello@creativeplusbusiness.com and let us know who they are, and we'll put them through their paces. All the groovy accountants have had to go through a process to be included, so it's a pretty good list. Now, in this session, we're going to go through a few things, and, you know, basically the fun never ends. So we're going to meet the Australian Taxation Office. Can I get a hell yeah? Hell yeah. Okay, no. Oh, I got one actual live hell yeah to meet the ATO. Look, I mean, I appreciate your lack of enthusiasm, but we're going to meet them anyway. We're also going to talk about a couple of those key tax rulings that I was talking about. We're going to talk about hobby versus business, which is really perplexing for a lot of people, and we need to kind of go into that in a little bit more detail. I'm going to give you some sneaky tips and tricks about tax deductions. some tips about record keeping, and then I'm going to shout at you for a little while and about keeping better habits. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of what we're doing. I appreciate that this may not be everything that you want to cover, but hopefully it's enough resources to keep you going. So let's meet the ATO, shall we? Yay. No, I've only got one hell yeah. Okay. I'm just going to share with you some screen grabs from their website so you can go out and have a look at them for yourself. So weirdly, the best place to go and find out about the Australian Taxation Office is from the Australian Taxation Office. You may never have been to this website. Personally, don't blame you, but here it is. You might have only ever visited the individuals section. It's time for you to brave the business section. Now, I'm not promising interpretive dance, but there are videos and there are plainly worded explanations for a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to come back to this page again in a minute and have a bit more of an explore. I have to be honest with you, it is a difficult website to navigate if you don't know what you're looking for. But you can see the search term up there. I'm going to give you some of the things to be looking for, and by entering those words into the search term, you'll find what you're looking for much more quickly. So rather than trying to kind of work your way through the menu and everything, just try that. There's also a newsroom attached to the ATO's website, the Small Business Newsroom. Now, this comes out every now and then. I think it's weekly. I'm looking around as if someone would be able to help me with the answer. I don't actually know. It doesn't feel like weekly. It feels like maybe fortnightly. Please go and sign up for it. Subscribe for it. It's free. Now, one of the reasons why I'm suggesting that you do that is because a lot of people feel like they've really nailed their taxes when they've got the past sorted out. And that's absolutely fantastic, right? We really want that for you. We want you to get the past sorted out. We want you to pay your income tax and get, you know, all the things that you're entitled to. But that's really just the first step. One of the most important things about running a business, especially a creative business, is tax planning, being able to look into the future. It's not just about making sure the past is sorted out, but how's your future going? Are you ready for your taxes? Are there any changes that are coming up that might affect you? That's why the Small Business Newsroom is so important. It's going to help you to anticipate what's coming so that you can plan for things a little bit better. Again, not promising, you know, interpretive dance and singing llamas, very sad, but it's still really useful. Another thing that's useful is their webinars. Now, there are a whole series of small business webinars that you can look at. There's a giant bunch of them, actually, and they cover a whole range of topics. So you can see here, I've got a little bit of a screenshot of all the different kinds of things that you can go looking at. Not all of them are going to be ideal for you, but they're really worthwhile doing. They're all free. They run for about 45 minutes. And as you can see there are a whole bunch about deductions, home-based business, motor vehicles, basically everything that you could want. You can watch them live like we're doing now so that you can ask questions. You can also watch recordings afterwards if you want to. The next thing that I want to introduce you to is, believe it or not, gird your loins for the most interesting thing on earth. Where is it? ATO TV. I know, believe it or not, the ATO have got their own channel on YouTube. So there's, again, a whole range of videos here that you can watch about a whole range of different topics. You can search for things that you're looking for. Some of them go for minutes, some of them go for longer. There's a bunch of content on there, and I highly recommend that you go and have a look at it. Creative professionals very often prefer their information to be delivered visually. I know I'm one of those people. I'd rather that you played me a 1-minute video than gave me 5 pages worth of text. If you're also in that boat, then I recommend that you go and have a look at their channel because, I mean, again, it's not the most exciting stuff you've ever seen, but it might convey the information in a way that makes better sense for you. 2 other things which are not from the ATO, but I want to introduce them to you anyway. The next one is business.gov.au. Business.gov.au is the federal government's small business website, and it's really a comprehensive go-to place for pretty much everything that you might need to know about small business. They're not creative specialists, that's us, but you can find a whole range of things, and they've got a whole page about preparing for taxes, including things like, should I get an ABN, what taxes do I need to register for, what records do I need. It's super, super comprehensive. So please go and have a look at it. And last but not least, we have the Arts Law Centre of Australia. Now, I love Arts Law. Some of you know I'm a gigantic fan. And they're an awesome organisation that really deserves our support. Yes, they do mostly focus on legal issues, but as you can see, right at the top there of legal topics is business structures, governance and tax. They have a range of information sheets, case studies, checklists and a whole bunch of stuff, which is specifically about arts, law, tax, governance, and so on. So please, if you want to just have 5 minutes to spare, do go and have a look and see what they have to offer. Now, before I go on to the heady and exciting world of tax rulings, I'm just going to have a look at some of the questions that you've been asking me. So I've got a question here which you can all see from Margot. I've heard about personal services income and you've been told that some of what you do may fall under this category. What does that mean and how does it affect me? So personal services income is a very specific part of income tax law for businesses that mostly applies to contractors, but not the kind of contractors that we might be. It tends to be more about people who are working in the construction industry. Margot, I don't want to give you any advice about this because, as you know, I'm not an accountant, but in my understanding of personal services income, it's something that used to affect creative professionals and is much less likely to do so. But what we can do is actually find a little bit more information about that and actually post it. I don't think it's going to be a problem for you. Like I said, 10 years ago, personal services income was really, really problematic for people, but it usually only affected people who got 80% of their business income from a single client. Most of us don't. But I don't want to freak you out about that, though. Most of those regulations have now moved. So I will make sure that when after the WebPod, after the webinar is finished, I'll actually put an answer in the comment section so that you can find out. Okay, thank you for asking. Okie dokie. Oh, I don't know how to drive the thing. Okay, I'm driving the thing. Oh no, I'm not driving the thing. Okay, I'm driving the thing. So sorry. It's just the worst. Okay, there we go. So next thing I want to talk to you about is tax rulings. So let's have a look at those. There are 3 tax rulings that specifically apply to creative practitioners. Now, you can find out if you really want to prepare yourself. You can find out more about public rulings here. There's actually 4 public rulings that I want to talk about. The 4th one is later on. Now, as it says there, public rulings are binding advice. It's situations where the tax office has been asked to make a ruling about a specific occupation or a specific kind of tax or a specific subset of the majority of taxpayers. And they've done that 3 times for people working in creative industries. The first one is this, and this is the most important one. This is tax ruling TR 2005/1, income tax carrying on business as a professional artist. Now, if you go onto Google and search for tax ruling 2005/1, you'll find this as a PDF. It's pretty easy to find. There's also a link to it from our website, which I'll point out in a little while. When it says carrying on a business as a professional artist, when they say artist, they actually do mean anybody mostly working in the creative industries. So, of course, it applies to visual artists, but the word artist is very broad. It also applies to writers and filmmakers and a whole group of people working in the creative industries. It's here where you'll find all of the actual details about what constitutes a creative business compared to a hobby. And I'm going to show you some more resources on that in a minute. It also contains a whole lot of information about the deductions that you're entitled to and what's classified as professional income. It's 44 pages long, but hang in there. It's still worth a read. I mean, I'm a bit of a nerd, so I found it worthwhile. But the reason why it's worth a read is that all the way through, there are case studies and examples of real life creative people and what their situation looks like. And I'll give you an example of that in a minute. So the next taxation ruling that's important for you, that's the main one, and that's where most of the information about how to manage your taxes as a creative comes from. But the next one is for performing artists. So the income tax ruling for performing artists is this one. This is a special ruling, again, TR 9520. Hang on one second, I'll just make that a little bit bigger. For employee performing artists. So anyone who's classified as a performing artist, that means actors, dancers, mimes, you know you're out there, mimes. You would be classified as both an artist and as a performing artist. So this one's specifically for you. Yes, clowns. Thank you, Irene. Please, no more mentions of all the different kinds of performing artists that there could be. I could feel the chat is going to get full of definitions. This is specifically for those of you who are performing artists, but rather than using your ABN for work, you're using your tax phone number for work. A lot of performing artists have to do that because it's usually the only offer that you get in terms of how to be employed, but it also means that you'll be covered by workers' compensation insurance and a whole bunch of other things that are really important. Even though you are an employee, and that usually means you're entitled to fewer deductions, when it comes to being a performing artist, there are loopholes around that because of the nature of your industry. So it helps you to actually, this tax ruling actually does break down what kind of makeup you can claim as a tax deduction compared to the makeup that you use for yourself. What kind of shoes you can claim as a tax deduction depending on your profession. Again, it's 50 pages of reading. I'm not promising anything magical, but there are answers in there and also lots and lots of examples and case studies so that it's not just a whole lot of dry reading. There's real life stuff in there to help you understand everything. The final taxation ruling that's important for you is for journalists. Now, that's probably going to make up a smaller amount of you. I don't know how many of you are journalists or professional writers. This is also specifically for employee journalists. So those of you who are writers and you're using your ABN, I refer you back to the first tax ruling that we talked about. But again, those of you who are writers employed with your tax file number, there are still some allowances and deductions that you're entitled to that other people are not. So you can look up that tax ruling on Google or on our website and find it pretty easily. I'm not promising anything scintillating, but here's an example of one of the case studies that I talked about. This is from the first tax ruling for professional artists, and it talks about whether or not Serge here is a professional writer. For the past 10 years, Serge has worked full-time in his chosen field. He's published his own work, but he also has a contract with a publishing company. He goes through all the amounts of money that Serge might have made. And then 2 years ago, Serge was appointed to an academic position where he was selected based on his literary field. Is Serge carrying on a business? And the answer is yes, he is. And that means he's entitled to a range of different deductions. I haven't given you the entirety of the example here because, clearly there wouldn't be time. But I do want to just show you that as an example of the kinds of examples and case studies that are included in these tax rulings so that to encourage you to go and have a look at them because they are based on real life examples. Now, I'm going to move on, but if you have any questions about those tax rulings, you can pop them into the question section down the bottom, or if you want to, you can pop them into the chat. I will see them either way. Next, I want to talk about hobby versus business. Now, this is a really complicated area, and I just want to give you a very kind of light dusting of information about it because it's not only is it complicated, it's also really subjective and personal. It's very hard to give you a broad range of rules about what you can and can't do with this because it's very individual. But it is of particular concern for creative people, and there's a reason for that. Let me just pop this over here for a second so I can talk to you all. Hi, how are you? So the reason this is problematic for us is because what we like to do for a living, other people like to do for fun. It puts us in strangely in the same category as professional athletes and sports people. What they like to do for a living, other people also like to do for fun. How do you tell the difference between a professional golfer and an amateur golfer? How do you tell the difference between a professional photographer and an amateur photographer? And it doesn't have as much to do with money as you might think. People usually think that the definition between being a business and a hobby is going to be based on how much money you earn. The tax office can't define it that way because it's possible to be an amateur photographer and still make some money. If this groovy man in this photograph was to take some of the photographs here and sell them, he might make a little bit of money out of them, but that doesn't necessarily make him a professional. By the same token, you can be a business that for tax purposes makes no money at all. Lots of businesses run at a loss and they're allowed to. The system is set up to support that. So you could be running a cafe that looks for all intents and purposes like a cafe, and yet if I went and looked at the books, maybe you're not running at a profit, maybe you're running at a loss. That doesn't mean you're not a cafe. It means that you're a cafe running at a loss. You can be a photographer running at a loss. So whether or not you're making money and how much money you're making or losing is not actually the way that this is usually worked out. It's worked out based on how you're running your business, how much time you're dedicating to it, and how seriously you're taking it. Now, nobody ever believes me about this, but I'm going to prove it to you. It's also important to make sure that you get this right, because whether or not you're running a business dictates the kind of deductions that you're entitled to. That's where it actually becomes important. 1 second, I'll just resize that. There we go. So, come back. This is a page again from the tax office. How do I know if it's a business or a hobby? The key questions to consider are these. Is your activity being undertaken for commercial reasons? Now, intention is really important here. If you have the intention to go and take photographs purely for your own pleasure and because you enjoy it, you're a hobbyist. If you have the intention of going out and taking photographs because you want to sell them and because you want to be hired as a photographer, then there's a higher chance that you are a business. Of course, you have to prove all of this stuff. You can't just go around saying things and then, expecting the ATO to believe you. We're going to talk about record keeping in a minute. But that's a really big part of it. And that's the second thing there, is that your main intention to make a profit. Yes, you're allowed to enjoy being a creative practitioner. Happily, fun is the tax-free byproduct of working in the creative industries. If your intention is I like a little spot of karaoke. Some of you know that. I have absolutely no intention of making any money out of it whatsoever. Although there was that one time that I won $50 in Darwin, but we need to talk about that at another time, okay? My intention from karaoke is to have fun. A different singer would have the intention of making money out of it, which makes them more professional. Do you regularly and repeatedly undertake your activity? This is a question about how much time that you spend on your business. Hobbyists tend to only spend a small amount of time on their hobby. I spend practically no time on karaoke at all. People who are in business spend a lot of time in their business, even if they've got a second job. So how much time you spend and being able to prove the time that you spend is really important. And is your activity planned, organized, and carried out in a business-like manner? That's about how well organized you are and how serious you're taking this. It's about having a business plan and a marketing plan and actually sticking to that plan and having habits and processes inside of your business that you're following in the usual way. I feel like there are going to be questions and comments about this, which is totally okay. You can ask me in the questions section, but while you're thinking about your questions, I wanted to show you this. This all used to be pretty vague and hard to work out. And it's certainly something that a lot of groovy accountants have specialised in over the years, which is absolutely fantastic. But now there's a quiz. Look, a quiz. Oops, go back to the quiz, Monica. So this quiz was put together by business.gov.au. It doesn't come, it's not on the ATO's website. I'm not entirely sure why. I think it probably would make them liable for too many things. Sorry. But this quiz allows you to fill out a whole range of questions that are relevant to the things that we've been talking about. The questions are actually pretty simple, and they ask you questions like what's your intention and how well organized are you and how much time do you spend on your activity and whether or not you do marketing. Now, that's a really, really important one. Whether or not you are conducting marketing activities is also more likely to make you look like a business for the purposes of tax. Hobbyists don't need to do any marketing because hobbyists are motivated entirely for pleasure, whereas businesses are motivated by making money. If you want to make money, then you've got to do marketing. So the more that you can prove all these things, for example, by having a marketing plan and a social media strategy and a website and a bit of regular activity dedicated to marketing yourself, all of that makes it more likely for you to be perceived as a business. The wording here is actually kind of timely, and it gives you a little clue as to why this has become something that became a little bit more relevant. Are you an artist, creative, or maker and unsure about your government obligations? This tool is for people who are getting money or intend to get money from creating things such as jewelry, paintings, candles, textiles, baked goods, etc. This was a quiz inspired by Etsy. It was inspired by people being now able to make and sell products online as a sideline to their regular activity. What's the difference between someone who makes jewelry every now and then and pops it on Etsy, or someone who is making jewelry as a business and popping it on Etsy? This quiz can help you. Now, what I want to do is actually switch to a screen where we can see this all happening live. I'm quite worried that I won't know how to do that. So hang in there for a second while I figure out how to do this. Oh, I'm nervous. Will we see if it works? Okay. So hang on 1 second. I should have some sort of like music that plays while I'm doing this. Oh, I don't know how to share my screen. Oh, there it is here. Share my screen. Oh, someone's telling me to share my screen. Okay, I will. So thank you, Irene, for that. No, I can't figure out how to do it. So that's really annoying. I'm sorry, everyone. Let me see if I do this instead. Anyway, if you are able to go to start.business.gov.au and you'll see the quiz that I'm talking about, and I promise for the next webinar I will learn how to share my screen. Lily will teach me. She's nodding. She's very wise in these things. You can go and have a look at the quiz yourself and you'll see exactly how easy it is to start answering the questions and putting things together. Thanks, Lil. Okay, now I'm having a look in the questions section just to see what's happening. No new questions apart from the one that we asked at the top and the one about how do I not go mental with my records. Irene, we're going to answer that one in a minute. So I promise you will not go unnoticed. Let's move on and start talking about deductions, because that's what everybody wants to talk about. Everybody wants to talk about tax deductions. This is the page on the ATO's website to go to get more information about income and deductions for your business. It goes through a whole list of what you can claim, what you can't claim, what the rules are for tax deductions. There are essentially 3 main rules. Here they are. This is a direct lift from the ATO's website. There are 3 golden rules for what the ATO accepts as a valid business deduction. The expense must have been for your business and not for private use. There's very, very little that's possible as a tax deduction for private use, almost nothing. But this is really, really subjective and personal. Let me see if I can give you an example. People are always trying to tell me that they can claim medical and health expenses as a tax deduction. The reality is that for most people, that is not the case. For most people, that would be considered a private expense. The rules are very strict about this, and that's why you need to go back and have a look at those tax rulings. But generally speaking, and I'm just going to keep it really general, the only people who can claim expenses like that are people who have to maintain a high degree of physical fitness in order to do their job. So a circus performer, for example, might be able to claim the cost of going to the gym because they have to keep themselves at athlete levels of fitness. But if you are an actor and you just want to be a little bit more buff, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to claim that as a tax deduction. Unfortunately, your hotness is a private expense. The same thing, for example, for makeup and clothing. Most of us can't claim the cost of makeup and clothing. It has to be directly linked to our professional work. So it's a really, really good idea to do that. We've just had a comment there from Julie about the article from Fox Michael. There's actually a link to that article from our Money Resources page, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. If the expense is a mix of business and private use, you can only claim the portion that's used for the business. There's an example of that down the bottom. So, for example, if you buy a laptop and you only use it for your business and never for anything personal, then you're actually allowed to claim the whole of the cost as a business expense. However, if you use the laptop 50% of the time for your business and 50% of the time for private use, then you can claim half of it. Now, that's a process called apportioning, and it's really, really important to make sure that you can prove your portions. If you have decided that you can claim 50% of your laptop because you use it half of the time for business, you have to be able to prove that. It needs to be in your records somehow. You need to keep a diary that dictates how often you're using it, or you need to keep a timesheet, or just make notes in your calendar, or a best guess estimate of how much you're using it every week that you can prove. So we're going to go through record keeping in a minute, but just make sure that whatever you're trying to claim, you need to have records to back it up. That's the third point there. You must have a record to prove everything that you're trying to claim for your business, and that does mean being as anally retentive as possible. I just want to quickly establish with you what a tax deduction is, because everybody seems to want to get them, but nobody really seems to understand what they're for. So a tax deduction, a tax deduction minimizes your tax bill. So first of all, you start off with what's called your gross assessable income. Your gross assessable income is all of the income that you've had in a financial year that can have tax attached to it. For you, that'll include income at your job. It will include income that you get through your ABN. If you're invoicing for your creative services or products, it'll include sales direct to customers for those of you who sell product. And it could include other things as well. Sometimes there are forms of income that people don't realize are assessable income. So, for example, some kinds of grants are actually assessable income. You might get an award for your professional work, and that could be classified as assessable income. Don't panic. Those are all the sorts of questions that you can ask of your accountant, or you can go directly to the Australian Tax Office to get more information about those sorts of things. So this is about your specific personal experience, which is why it's really important that you get an expert who can work with you to help you out. That's what we start with, the whole amount. So in the example there, I've said you've made $30,000 from your professional work. We then have tax deductions. These are all the expenses associated with your professional work that you're legally allowed to claim or minus from that first amount. What you're left with is your taxable income. That's the amount that you pay tax on. So the idea here is that you have your whole income, but then you legally reduce it by being able to claim deductions against that income, and then whatever you're left over with, you pay tax on. It's about trying to reduce your tax bill. That's a really important thing to remember, because some of you who are getting paid by invoices and through your ABNs are not having tax withheld from you. And that's really important to remember, because a lot of people think that a deduction and a refund are exactly the same thing, and they are not. If you spend $1,000 on a computer, the tax office isn't going to give you $1,000 in exchange, right? That's not how it works. They're not reimbursing you. You're just minimizing your eventual tax bill. If tax has been withheld from you by your employer, or if you've been putting your own taxes away, which is called PAYG installments, then you might have put away enough money to pay the bill associated with the original amount, but by reducing the amount of the bill, you've kind of overpaid, which is why you get a refund. Okay, that's where the refund comes from. If you haven't been putting any money aside for your taxes, and if you haven't been getting tax withheld from you by an employer, then what we've basically just done here is reduce the bill. I know that sounds really complicated, and you might need to watch that over a few times and talk to your accountant about it, but that's what a deduction is for. You're not going to get a reimbursement on that expense. It's just going to lower your bill. I really, really hope that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, just watch it over again, or, let me know in the chat section that it didn't make sense, and I'll do my best to rectify that. So, working on the assumption that we understand what a tax deduction is, I just want to go through some of the main ones with you and give you some tips on how to work out what you're entitled to. The first one that I like to talk about is working from home. A lot of creative practitioners work from home, or they work out of their home studio, or whatever it might be. Now, if you have an expense which is 100% for business use, then you're allowed to claim 100% of that tax deduction. So if you're paying for a studio that is only used as a studio, if you're paying for co-working space, or if you're lucky enough to have a beautiful office like we do, ta-da, then that's 100% of a tax deduction, because there's no personal expenses in there. The working from home is an example of apportioning. So remember the laptop computer example, where some of the laptop was used for business and some of it was used for personal? This is exactly the same. Some of your home is used for private or personal use, and some of your home is a business. Now, it gets really, really complicated at this point, because it depends on what you're allowed to claim, depends on how much space you're using in your home, what kind of office you have, whether or not that's part of shared space like your lounge room, or you've actually got a totally separate space with a door that can be closed. It actually gets really, really complicated at this point. But never fear, there is a solution. There is a home office expenses calculator on the tax office's page. So if you go back to the ATO's website and you look for home office expenses calculator, you will find this. It goes through all the different things that you will need. And remember the golden rule number 3, you must have receipts and records to help you to explain all of these expenses. But once you get to that point, you can go to the home office expense calculator, which is here, and you can fill out all of these details. Now, the first question is a tricksy one, and there is more information about this in the website. Are you entitled to claim a deduction for occupancy expenses? That means that in order to be able to claim a deduction for occupancy expenses, it means you have a completely separate room within your house that is only used for business purposes. It's not a shared space like a bedroom that's also an office, okay? It's just an office all by itself, or a studio all by itself. So if someone was to walk into your home and they walked into that room, they'd look at it and go, that's an office or that's a studio. It's not anything else. If that is the case, and there is a part of your house that is completely set up for a studio, then you might be able to claim a percentage of your rent or a percentage of the interest that you're paying on your mortgage or a percentage of your insurance. But if your home office space is shared space, don't worry, you're still allowed to claim other things like running expenses. You might be able to claim a percentage of your electricity bill or your home internet. For those of you who aren't sure, there's also the possibility of being able to claim an amount of money per hour of working from home. Now, I believe that's 52 cents per hour, but I'm just going to quickly hop onto the ATO's website and check that. If any of you actually do know the rate, can you pop it in the chat section? We've had it written down on my bit of paper, but I don't. So I'm just having a quick look now. Running expenses, there's a video, fixed rate. Instead of recording all of your actual expenses for heating, cooling, lighting, cleaning, etc., you can claim a deduction of 52 cents per hour when you work from home. And you can actually calculate that out in the calculator when you go into it. To claim this method, keep records of the actual hours that you spend working at home for a year, or keep a diary of a representative 4-week period to show your usual pattern of working from home. You might need to also work out separate expenses like the phone and internet and that kind of thing, consumables like stationery and stuff like that, so they can be worked out separately. And again, you can do all of that on this calculator. But 52 cents an hour means that if you can show through your diary or your calendar that you spend 20 hours a week working from home, then you're allowed to claim 20 times 52 cents. It's 20 times 52 cents, Lily. No, Lily doesn't know either. Is that like $10? I think that's about $10. Irene, is that $10? $12. There you go. I know, now you're all feeling really nervous that you're taking tax advice from a woman who can't make that kind of maths in her head. $12 for every week that you're working. So if you're working a 40-hour week, a 40-week year, then that works out to be $480 that you can claim as a tax deduction, which is pretty nifty. Julie said 45 cents. It's 52 cents. Do you want to claim a deduction of 45 cents per hour based on actual use or an established pattern of use? Now, that's a really good question, Julie. It's 52 cents. It's gone up. That really depends on the nature of your work. So if your work is reasonably predictable, you're always writing in your home office for 20 hours a week or making in your studio for 15 hours a week, you can do it that way. But it's a great question because when I used to work from home, I didn't have that kind of regularity. Sometimes I'd be working from home for 10 hours in the week, and then the next week I might do like a 40-hour week out of my home office. So if you've got a bit more of a variable professional life, I'd actually keep a diary for the whole of the year. I know it sounds like a pain in the bum, and it is, but you will need to present those kinds of records if you get audited or if the ATO has questions about what you're doing. Let me just pop into the questions section, and then someone's asked, can you claim for home office expenses if you're an employee? Generally not is the answer for that. So now where did that go? Hang on a second. Oh, it's gone. So generally you can't. $10.40. Thank you, Margot. If you're an employee, the idea is that all of your expenses should be getting paid by your employer. So if you're working from home, then you should be compensated any costs associated with that by your employer. Your employer is supposed to be providing you with everything that you need. So if your employer has been unable to provide you with what you need, let's say you're working from home and you're using your own laptop because your employer hasn't provided you with one, then yes, you might be able to claim some of those costs. But those are the kinds of specific questions that you really need to talk to your own accountant about because your individual situation is a bit tricky to understand. And I just want to do another shout out to Margot. Thank you for doing the maths for us. I appreciate your handy dandy calculator. Now, the next thing we need to talk about is your car. Now, motor vehicle expenses are the same for self-employed creative people as they are for everybody else. And that is that there are 4 different methods that you can use to claim relevant motor vehicle expenses, and you can only claim expenses that are associated with travelling from one place of work to another place of work. You're not allowed to claim a tax deduction for travelling from home to work. So here is the calculator on the ATO's website that allows you to work all this out. You can select what year, and you can add what kind of car it is. This quiz will ask you a whole bunch of questions about the size, how many cylinders your car has, how far you traveled, what you paid for it, all that stuff. Keep all of your records when it comes to your car, because there are 4 different methods for claiming a deduction. And unless you've got all your records for the whole year, you won't necessarily know which one is going to get you the best result. So sometimes you'll be given the advice of just picking one at the beginning and sticking with that. That's good advice if you are always going to the same place doing the same thing. But for most creative professionals, our lives are way too unpredictable. So sometimes you might be driving hundreds of kilometres for work, sometimes you might be working from home. Again, if you've got a pretty unpredictable professional life, I'd actually recommend, boring though it is, keep your records for the whole time so that you know what you can do. I need to move on in the interest of time because we've got a couple of other things that we need to talk about. So the next one is other kinds of travel. So if you're traveling in your car from one place of work to another, of course, that's fine, but there might be other kinds of travel that you are doing. Now, there's not a calculator for this, but there is a page about keeping travel expense records for vehicle expenses other than your car and for overnight trips. The ATO allows you to claim a tax deduction if you're traveling overnight for work. It doesn't actually matter how far away from home you are. What matters is whether or not you stayed overnight. So if you have a 2-hour trip for work and then you come home on the same day, you can't claim the expenses associated with overnight stays, obviously. If you travel for 2 hours for work and then you stay the night in a hotel, then you might be able to claim a whole bunch of stuff like the cost of the motel and your meal and any other kind of ancillary expenses that you had. You're also allowed to claim things like parking tolls and fees for using a parking station, but you're not allowed to claim parking fines or speeding tickets. So lead foots, geez, that was much more dramatic than I meant it to be. Lead foots, sorry, your speeding fines are not a tax deduction. Next one is self-education expenses. If you have been spending money on educating yourself by going to workshops or by signing up to webinars that you have to pay for or whatever it might be, if that learning is associated with your professional practice, then you might be able to claim that as a tax deduction. And guess what? There's a calculator for that as well. The self-education expenses calculator helps you to work out whether or not the thing that you did and the study that you undertook could be defined as a professional expense. That could be for something really little, like a weekend workshop. It also could be for something really big, like a diploma course. I'm not saying that all diploma courses are a tax deduction. It's really specific to you, but it's certainly worthwhile having a look at. And this is what I mean about pre-planning. This isn't just about looking into the past to see what you've been spending money on. For next financial year, 2019-2020, this might be about planning in advance to minimize your tax bill by figuring out what you might want to spend money on that can help you strategically in the long run. The next one, and probably the next biggest one, is other people. Hiring other people to help you, whether that's the cost of your accountant or the cost of other freelancers that you've had to hire or the cost of anybody working for you in any way, is almost always a tax deduction for your business. What's really important about hiring other people is checking to see whether or not you're also expected to pay their super. That is a legal requirement in a lot of cases, and particularly in the creative industries. There are special considerations for service providers working in the creative industries. It's very, very possible that you are going to have to pay the superannuation of the other people who work for you. It is also possible that you are entitled to superannuation as part of your work. So let me just have a quick look here. Sorry, I thought I saw another question pop up, but it did not. I lied. Okay, I'm sorry about that. So this is the tool that you need to go and have a look at to see whether or not you should be paying superannuation to other people and whether or not you're entitled to superannuation yourself. It's a calculator to help you work it out. Now, I hear so many bits of misinformation about that. This is actually really distressing. If you are invoicing people through your ABN and you are providing a service in the creative industries, if you are making more than $450 a month from that job, it's very, very possible that you're entitled to superannuation, and that superannuation should be paid into a separate account, into your savings account, into your superannuation fund for you, okay? So if you're not sure about any of this, please go to this calculator and work it out. It's not going to be the case for all of you. Some of you won't be entitled to super because of the job that you do. Some of you who are selling products and things, you won't be entitled to it either. There's a specific group of you who might be entitled to superannuation for contractors, and I want you to go to this tool to find out. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to keep barreling on here. Everything else, there's a whole range of other things that are a tax deduction for you, and this is the place where you can find them all. We've got a page on our website which is happily called Deductions for Creative Businesses, and this is where I've got a list of all of the things that I've already just mentioned and all of those calculators and tools, as well as a whole bunch of other things that you can go and have a look at, and some resources from some of our groovy accountant friends, like the one that Julie mentioned in the chat, and from Electra, and from a couple of other people that we work with. So you can find a bunch of resources there. Please do go and check it out after we've finished. Now, I want to talk to you about record keeping. We have a question. Okay, so hang on, we've got a question here from Margot. Sorry, my broadcast broke up there. What was that amount? I don't know which amount that you were talking about there, Margot. Sorry about that. Pop it in the chat. Now, record keeping, the fun never ends. Let's talk about record keeping. The fourth tax ruling that I promised you was here. There is an income tax ruling about record keeping, TR 96-7. If you are really, really keen, you can go and have a look at it, but you don't have to. I'm going to give you the basics now. So, first point, you must keep records that explain all of your business transactions. So, if you want to, if any money is coming into your business and any money is coming out of your business, you must be able to explain where it came from. Give me 1 second here. I've got to have a sip of tea. Talking for an hour is hard work. Now, any income that you've got, then it needs to be a record that explains that. That could be an invoice that you send to a client or a pay slip that you get from an employer. It could even be something like a contract. You also have to have a record that explains all the money going out. That could be receipts, tax invoices, notations in your diary, anything and everything. Whatever kind of record you can get, you should get it. Bank statements and things like that are really, really good and important, but they're not enough. And the reason why they're not enough is because of that tricky little word there, explain. A bank statement doesn't necessarily explain the expense, whereas a receipt does. So there's more information in there about what you bought and when and what it was for and all that kind of thing. Second, you must keep written records in English. If you keep electronic records on your computer, they must be in a form that can be easily accessed and converted to English. Okay. Now that means you can keep both paper and digital records. That's fine. The ATO are becoming increasingly comfortable with digital, but if you've got expenses from overseas because you were, traveling through Spain and you found a beautiful camera that you wanted to buy and the transaction is in euros, you have to be able to translate that into English. The third thing is that you must keep any account books, records, or documents related to preparing your tax return for at least 5 years after they were prepared and obtained or the transaction was completed. At least 5 years. So my recommendation is to keep your digital copies for as long as you possibly can. There's no reason to delete them. You can keep them all in the cloud. As long as your records meet these requirements, you can keep them in whatever way you like. But I have a few recommendations for this. I think it's really important for those of you who are not using the cloud to give it a go. Now, it's 7:30, but I'm going to keep going. I've got about 5 minutes more. So apologies to those of you who have to go. You'll be able to watch the recording later. For those of you who can still hang in there, I promise I'm almost finished. This is a record-keeping evaluation tool that's available from the ATO's website. It allows you to evaluate whether or not the records that you're keeping are appropriate for the kind of work that you're doing. So I would go and fill that out and have a look at it and see what you think. There's nothing wrong with keeping paper records, but paper records do become complicated because paper fades, particularly if you're keeping it in plastic. If you're keeping your thermal receipts in plastic, they will fade and they'll fade really quickly. But of course, paper is also pretty easy to destroy. You know, the dog might eat it, who knows? The ATO has got its own methods of keeping digital records, which I recommend that you go and have a look at. We've got a couple of other suggestions as well. These are let me just check, 1, 2, 3 cloud accounting systems that we recommend to our clients, and they're really worthwhile having a look at because they're going to help you to keep your records. Now, cloud accounting, most people think Quicken, QuickBooks, MYOB, or Xero. Those are all fantastic platforms and they are really worth it, but they're also expensive. So if you're new to cloud accounting, I wouldn't necessarily recommend those as a first step. What I would recommend as a first step is Wave. Now, the reason I recommend Wave as a first step is because it's free. I know, I can hear you all now going, but wait, how can it be free? How is that a thing? Oh, thank you, Daniela. Yes, we recommend it too. The reason we recommend Wave, the reason why Wave is free is because it's not a subscription service like Xero or MYOB. It's a fee for service, and the basic services are totally free. So the more complicated things that you might need later do have a cost attached to them, things like getting paid with a credit card or payroll. But if you're just if you're a sole trader or if you're just starting out, you won't have those sort of complications, and the charges are really minimal when they do kick in. So Wave is a really great starting off point if you've never used cloud accounting before. A couple of little things about it. One, it is Canadian, which means that, of course, we love it. Who doesn't love Canadians? But the other thing to remember about that is that you have to go into the settings and change some of the settings to be for Australia rather than Canada. So you have to set it to Australian dollars. You have to set it to our financial year, 1st of July to the 30th of June, and you have to set it for our GST. You also have to connect it to your bank account. Now, when it comes to cloud accounting, the most important thing about keeping your records is to have a separate business bank account. There are a range of free business bank accounts that you can get, and there are links to some of those from our website, because the cloud accounting software connects to your bank account and then it reflects everything that's happening in your bank account. You can attach it to your personal bank account, but then it gets really messy. It's a really simple and easy way of keeping your records is to keep everything separate. Your personal income and expenses in one account and your other expenses in a business account. Now, Margot says, Wave was recently purchased by H&R Block. Was it now? But they've said they're keeping the current model. Oh, fascinating. All right, well, we better keep an eye on them to see whether or not it stays free. Thank you very much for letting me know that. Let's hope it's free. We'll keep an eagle eye out. So every single cloud accounting software works the same way. It reflects whatever's happening in your bank account. So set up a separate business bank account, even if you've only got tiny little numbers of transactions, because it will help you to learn how to do this with relatively small amounts of money. Another one that we recommend is Square. Now, some of you may be used to Square already because Square provides point of sale devices like what you can see here in the slide. Nifty little things that you can plug into your iPhone or take with you to the markets that allow you to accept transactions. And I'm sure some of you are either using Square or you've seen Square used before. A lot of people don't know is that Square has a back end called Dashboard, which is essentially the same thing as Wave. It allows you to issue invoices and track the money that's going in and out of your business bank account. And again, it's free. Once you purchase the point of sale device, you can use Square Dashboard for nothing. So if Wave doesn't necessarily float your boat, you can go and have a look at this one. The last one that I wanted to mention, apart from the others that I've already talked about, is Rounded. Now, we're recommending Rounded even though it costs money. It's not as expensive as Xero or MYOB, but we're particularly recommending Rounded because it's Australian. It's a small business that's run by Australian people, and they're specifically set themselves up to help freelancers and self-employed people. I've been in contact with them on a fairly regular basis. They'll learn more from us about what we need and what's happening. So check them out. Like I said, I think the cost is about $15 a month, but it might be worthwhile investigating if it's something you're interested in. Now, the final thing that I want to talk to you about is developing some better habits. Most of the time, people like to ignore their financial situation, and particularly when it comes to tax. And I don't blame you, because even though I am unreasonably excited about all this kind of stuff, I appreciate the fact that it's pretty dull. And it's also pretty scary if you don't know what you're doing. And it's also not something you're necessarily going to be compelled to learn about. It's a beautiful sunny day and you've got the choice of staying inside and learning more about your tax or going outside and playing with your puppy dog. I know exactly which one you're going to pick. Well, I know which one I'd pick. And Lily would also, and Irene, actually everyone here would pick playing with their dog. So, you know, I totally understand it. But, you know, when it comes to your taxes and being a creative professional and doing things properly, probably time for us to put our big boy and girl pants on and actually learn how to do all this stuff. The one thing that I really recommend is Money Day. As most of you know, I'm not particularly gifted when it comes to naming things. Money Day is exactly what it says on the tin. A whole day dedicated to sorting out your finances. There's a resource available on our website, an information sheet, which is helpfully called Monthly Money Day. And here is where I go through all of the things that I have done on Monthly Money Day for the whole of my career. As it says there in the first sentence, I have always found great comfort and solace in practicing Money Day. I get very anxious about money, like most people, and I also get really anxious in horror movies, because I don't like anything set in the dark. I like to turn the lights on. That's what Monthly Money Day is. It's yucky, and I'm not promising anything exciting, but it's just once a month, 12 times a year of just turning on the big shiny light of your financial situation and organizing yourself, working out where all your receipts are, and then, you know, putting them all together so you can kind of keep on top of your record keeping, making sure that you've sent all of your invoices that you're supposed to, making sure that you've gone into your cloud accounting and reconciled everything in there, checking on your insurances to make sure you're getting the best deal, checking on your superannuation to make sure that it's performing properly. Absolutely everything that you can think of to do about money, do it all on one day. And I promise you that this whole situation will get a whole lot better. I personally like to end Money Day with a lovely glass of champagne and maybe a bit of lounge room disco. Make sure you end Money Day in some way that you enjoy. The bottom line is, though, that by sticking to it regularly and creating that habit, this whole process is going to get easier. I didn't start off my creative life knowing anything about tax. It has taken me a long time to learn it and to learn how to share it. It is learnable. It's not fun, but it is learnable. This is the page on our website where you can find all of the money resources that I've been talking about, including links to a whole bunch of things like business accounts and insurance. And the Monthly Money Day resource is a downloadable PDF that you can find right at the bottom of the page. I'd also suggest that you incorporate money into your Monday morning meeting. Now, I'm thinking about having a webinar about the Monday morning meeting because it's important. What do you think?
Yeah.
Should we do that? Yeah, Lily says we're going to do that, so we'll put it on the list. The Monday morning meeting is, again, exactly what it says on the tin, a regular meeting that you have with yourself. There's more information about it there on the website, as you can see, and it's really just bringing financials into your weekly check-in as well. Now, to wrap up, thank you so much for joining us. I do appreciate you hanging in there for the extra 10 minutes. I'm sorry I went long, but we have a lot to talk about. I hope that you found all of these resources helpful. I want to thank Lily and Irene for being my supporters, and I also want to thank Unsplash for providing us with all the beautiful pictures that we've seen. Our next webinar is about LinkedIn. Let the fun begin. Tuesday, the 30th of July. You'll be able to connect to that from tomorrow onwards, or you can actually go onto Crowdcast and find the link for it right now. We are going to actually bust the myth that LinkedIn is not for creatives for a whole hour. So once again, covering all the sexy, exciting topics that you really, really need to know. But I promise you it'll be interesting and informative. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. Hopefully I didn't mess up our first experience of Crowdcast too much, and we will see you again in a month. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Bye. She says, not knowing how to end the broadcast. Oh, here we go. Bye.